You know that moment when you are sitting in your car in the work parking lot at 7:15 in the morning, engine off, just staring at the dashboard while you do the math in your head about how many more of these mornings you have left until you can actually quit. The number comes back so depressing that you kind of laugh to yourself and walk into the building anyway. Yeah, that exact feeling. Here is what nobody tells you. If you are 55 or older, buried in the tax code, there is a quiet little provision that could let you walk out the door tomorrow. Tap your 401k and skip the 10% penalty everyone else has to pay. It is called the Rule of 55, and it ranks as one of the most misunderstood escape hatches in the entire American retirement system. I'm George Mitchell. And look, my goal isn't to talk you into quitting your job by lunchtime. What I want to do is walk you through what this rule actually does, who it actually helps, and why, for a specific kind of person, pulling this lever could be the single best financial move of their life. For everyone else, it is a trapdoor. You decide which one you are. Let me describe the lever, because that is really the metaphor I want you to hold on to here. Picture a big industrial lever, the kind with a red handle, mounted on the wall of your financial life. Most people walk past it for 30 years without ever noticing it is there. The Rule of 55 is that lever, and when you pull it, a very specific thing happens, while a bunch of other things very much do not. Here is what the lever actually does. Normally, when you yank money out of a 401k before turning 59 and a half, the IRS slaps you with a 10% penalty on top of regular income tax, which means pulling out 50 grand cost you $5,000 just for the privilege of touching your own money early. The Rule of 55 waives that penalty. That is the whole magic trick. Under Internal Revenue Code, Section 72(2) of V, if you separate from your job during or after the calendar year you turn 55, distributions from that employer S401k or 403b come out without the 10% hit. If you happen to be a public safety worker, meaning a cop, a firefighter, an EMT, a corrections officer, or an air traffic controller, the deal gets even sweeter because the age drops to 50. That is 5 extra years of freedom. The carve-out expanded under the 2015 Defending Public Safety Employees Retirement Act, and Secure Act 2.0 widened it again to include private sector firefighters. Now, here is where most people get the lever wrong. They assume it gives them unlimited access to every retirement account they've ever owned, and it absolutely does not. The rule only works on the 401k of the employer you just left, which means old 401k S from previous jobs done T-qualify. Your IRA doesn't qualify, and your spouse's plan doesn't qualify either. The second you roll that 401k into an IRA, the protection vanishes forever. The money has to stay put in that specific plan, doing exactly what it is doing. You might be wondering why I'm telling you that you should retire ASAP. Honestly, I'm not exactly saying that. What I'm telling you is that if the math actually works for you, there is a real chance you're sitting on an opportunity you don't realize you have. And the math works for more people than you'd think. Take this finding. The 2025 EBRI Retirement Confidence Survey found that 3 out of 5 retirees end up retiring earlier than they planned, with the median actual retirement age landing at 62, not the 65 most workers expect. The reasons are familiar. Health problems, layoffs, caring for a parent, a company restructuring that puts you on a list you didn't know existed. Life. Basically, life happens, and it doesn't check your spreadsheet first. Imagine you are 56, and you get laid off. The standard advice tells you to roll your 401k into an IRA the second you walk out the door. And every financial influencer on the internet repeats that same line. For plenty of people in plenty of situations, that advice is genuinely fine. But if you needed access to that money before 59 and a half, you just slammed the trapdoor shut on yourself and gave up the rule of 55 for nothing. Before I get into who this actually helps and who it absolutely destroys, I want to mention something quickly. If this kind of breakdown is useful to you, the kind where I'm not screaming at you about a market crash or trying to sell you a course, just hit the subscribe button. The algorithm only shows this stuff to people who engage with it. And honestly, the more boring middle-aged people watching retirement tax code videos the better the recommendations get for all of us. That is the whole pitch. Back to the lever. Who should actually pull it? Let me give you the profile of the person this rule was practically designed for. You are 55 to 59. You have a decent chunk in your current employer, S401k, and we're talking 200,000 or more. Either you're being laid off, you're burned out beyond repair, or you've genuinely hit your number. There is other money to live on too, which means a spouse still working, a taxable brokerage account, a pension kicking in, something. Draining the 401k isn't the goal. You just need a bridge. 5 years of partial withdrawals to get you to 59 and a half. The point at which every retirement account you own opens up penalty-free anyway. For that person, the rule of 55 is incredible. You pull the lever. You take out maybe 30 or 40 grand a year to supplement your other income. You pay regular income tax on it, which is probably lower now that you're not working. And you bridge the gap. Clean, elegant, the way the tax code rarely is. But here is the part most people miss. The lever has a dark side, and pulling it when you shouldn't is genuinely catastrophic. Picture someone at 55 with 300,000 in their 401k. No other significant savings. Who gets laid off? They watch a YouTube video, get excited about the rule of 55, quit looking for work, and start pulling 40 grand a year to live on. Sounds reasonable, right? Except that 300 grand was supposed to compound for another decade and grow into maybe 5 or 600,000. Instead, they're drawing it down while it shrinks, and they burn through it by 65. From there, they're living on Social Security alone, which, according to the SSA, averages around $2,000 a month. That isn't retirement. That is just being broke with extra time. The average household with members aged 55 to 64 carries a median retirement savings of about $185,000. The mean lands higher, around $500,000. But the median tells the real story, because a few wealthy households pull the average way up. For most people sitting in that 55 to 64 bracket, 185 grand has to stretch potentially 30 years. You cannot rule of negative 55 your way out of that math. The lever doesn't create money. It just changes when you're allowed to touch it. There are some weird mechanical traps too. Certain employer plans won't let you take partial withdrawals after you leave, which forces you to take the whole balance as a lump sum and can rocket you into a higher tax bracket for one brutal year. Some plans don't allow rule of 55 distributions at all, even though the IRS permits them, because the employer chose to opt out. A mandatory 20% federal withholding also applies to most of these distributions. And while that isn't your final tax bill, it does mean less cash hitting your account than you expected. Before you do anything, call your plan administrator. Not your buddy at work, not Reddit, the actual administrator. 3 questions to ask. Does my plan allow partial withdrawals after separation? Does my plan honor the rule of 55? And what is the withholding going to look like? Get the answers in writing if you can. Here is where I land on this whole thing. The rule of 55 stands as one of the most generous, least known provisions in the tax code, and it has been sitting there in Section 72T since the Tax Reform Act of 1986. For nearly 40 years, that provision has quietly helped the people who knew about it and quietly been missed by the people who didn't. Whether you should pull the lever depends entirely on whether you have a real plan or just a tired feeling. Both are valid. Only one of them survives the next 30 years. Tell me in the comments. If you could walk out of your job at 55 with no penalty, would you actually do it? Or would the fear of running out keep you in that parking lot at 7:15 in the morning for another decade? I'm genuinely curious where you land, because the answer says more about us than any spreadsheet ever could. If this was useful, subscribe so I can keep making these. I'll see you in the next one.